Win or lose, both the Axis and Allied armies produced many men in World War II that went above and beyond the call of duty for their respective countries. Some of these men were the men that put their bodies on the line time and time again in a nationalistic fervor that won them infamy amongst the opposing armies, and others were men who used their immense skill to simply terrorize enemies from afar. With that being said, in today's front video, we'll be staying true to the channel name and taking a look at 7 different men from 7 different countries who greatly impacted the battlefields they fought on. Regardless of how they did this, the men chosen all had an impact on their enemies in one way or another, usually through sheer skill and force of will in combat, as well as propaganda in some cases. Although we all know that such a highly complex and massive war can't be distilled down to the individual, this video intends to highlight the men who are on the front lines and aims to simplify their actions in the context of only a battlefield. Please keep in mind that this is part 2 of this mini-series, and I'll link part 1 if you missed it after this video. Also, although this is likely where the series ends, I'm willing to make a part 3 if I get enough suggestions in the comments section below from countries I haven't already done. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into the video. If we're speaking technicalities here, Paddy Finnegan was technically a soldier of the British Army, as Ireland remained neutral in World War II. In saying that, I've decided to add Ireland as its separate country in the video, since there were tens of thousands of Irish citizens who ultimately left their country to fight Nazi Germany. One of these men was Dublin-born Paddy Finnegan. His parents, admittedly, did end up moving to England 3 years before the war started. However, they nonetheless still retained a proud Irish heritage. In 1939, as the world braced for impact as Germany tore through Poland's defences, Finnegan did his part by applying to become a Royal Air Force pilot. At first, his marks were dead on average, and he wasn't considered spectacular in any regard by his superiors. Despite these less than promising signs, Finnegan carried on practicing his actual flying skills, and in 1940, when France fell and the Battle of Britain was underway, he was given his first shot as an active fighter pilot. Finnegan quickly found his feet here and ended up with 4 kills and 1 damaged, a respectable effort which thus saw him promoted to acting flight lieutenant. The truly remarkable part of his career, however, came in the Circus Offensive, where he managed to destroy 20 German aircraft in the span of 8 months over an enemy-controlled France and against seasoned Luftwaffe veterans. He was subsequently promoted and became the RAF's youngest wing commander in history, before his Spitfire was tragically damaged by flak and he tried to cross the English Channel unsuccessfully, disappearing into the ocean. Finnegan was survived by his brother Raymond Finnegan, who was also a pilot and who survived the war. The subject of the famous Sabaton song Inmate 4859, Witsel Palicki has to be one of the bravest and most honourable men of the entire war. This Polish patriot started his career in the Polish army in 1920, where in the Polish-Soviet War, he earned his stripes for bravery and skill in combat. In 1939, when Germany invaded, Palicki continued his dedication to country and served as a cavalry officer against the invading force. Although his platoon was almost completely destroyed after a vicious encounter with German forces, Palicki managed to retreat and link up with the remnants of the Polish army, where he and his men managed to further destroy 7 tanks and shot down an aircraft. Following Poland's surrender in September of 1939, he and many of his men continued fighting as partisans, wreaking havoc on Germany's supply lines. Eventually though, his division was disbanded and it was every man for himself. Palicki, not wanting to go down so easily, co-founded the secret Polish army as one of the first underground organizations of the war. Now, arguably, comes one of Palicki's most famous feats of the war. He volunteered himself to infiltrate the Auschwitz death camp. Yes, that meant willingly becoming a prisoner in one of the most atrocious camps of the war. Although Palicki had to falsify some records to enter the camp, he didn't really have to do much, as what Nazi expects someone crazy enough to willingly enter one of their death camps for the sole reason of gathering information? Well, that's exactly what Palicki did, and through his connections with the Polish Home Army, he managed to smuggle items both inside and outside of the camp, including proof of atrocities in case he didn't make it out to testify. In April of 1943, however, Palicki decided he had seen enough and escaped the camp. Although the Allies at the time treated his claims of Auschwitz with little regard, as they were the first ever reports of the atrocities permitted by Nazi Germany, as the war drew on, they began to figure it out for themselves. As for Palicki after this, well, he linked back up with the Home Army and became a legendary figure in the anti-communist resistance after the war, where in 1947 he eventually paid for this with his life and was arrested and sentenced to death by communist scum. A sad ending to such a great man. Italy, it is known, has a less than stellar reputation when it comes to fighting in World War II. The Italian army was largely unorganized, demoralized, and lazy. Most of them simply didn't care about the war and worried more about food than about guns and killing. There were, of course, some exceptions, and these exceptions are personified by Junior Valerio Borghese, nicknamed the Black Prince, who was an Italian naval commander during the war. Borghese was a dedicated fascist, as hardline as they came, and subsequently was a very dedicated combatant, managing to launch extremely daring raids against British battleships in his submarine, with his most famous being the heavy damaging of the HMS Valiant and the HMS Queen Elizabeth, for which he was awarded the Gold Medal of Military Valor. As an unsure Italy fluctuated politically, however, Borghese stayed resolute in his fascist convictions and continued to volunteer with the Wehrmacht after the Italian surrender. After the war, he was imprisoned for a discounted term of 4 years by the Italian government, and after his release was still dedicated to fascism and continued to politically pursue it, even attempting a coup d'etat in 1970. He eventually died in 1974 at the ripe old age of 68. As low-key as the Canadians are, the fact of the matter is, in World War II, they were some of the best soldiers the Commonwealth had to offer. None displays the skill, cunning, and ferocity quite like Leo Major, who, mind you, only joined the Canadian Army to prove his father that he wasn't an unemployed failure. His first taste of combat came on the beaches of Normandy, where he was part of the front lines on Juno, which was, like Omaha, an extremely well-defended beach. Major wasted no time getting to work and single-handedly took down an armored car full of Germans as well as 4 SS men on a separate occasion. During the fighting on the Western Front, Major was wounded by a grenade and lost his eye, earning him the nickname Pirate. He argued that having one eye actually improved his aim, and in 1945, acting as a sniper and a scout, he pulled off his most immense feat yet, with only one eye. He managed to single-handedly capture 93 German prisoners through the element of surprise and by capturing their commanding officer first, marching them back to Allied lines. The craziness doesn't stop here, however, and when Major later suffered a broken back, he escaped the hospital he was in to rejoin the fight, and was sent to a Dutch town on a scouting mission where he managed to convince an entire SS garrison they were surrounded by firing a machine gun randomly and chucking grenades randomly, and then capturing the patrols of SS that were sent out to investigate the noise. This SS garrison fled the town, and the rest of the Canadian force entered to liberate the town the next day without a single shot being fired, all thanks to Leo Major. Major was awarded the Distinguished Conduct Medal and won another one during the Korean War, and eventually, after his years of fighting, retired in Montreal, passing away in the quiet suburbs in 2008 at the ripe old age of 87. A life honorably lived. Well, if you watched part 1 of this video, you definitely heard the story of Jack Churchill, or Mad Jack, an English native with a love for Scottish culture and who went a little crazy in battle. Well, he wasn't the only kilted killer of the British Army, and if we're talking ethnically Scottish soldiers gone mad, then Tommy Macpherson is your man. Originally sent to North Africa as a reconnaissance man for Allied landings, Macpherson and his men were captured by the Germans after a mission gone wrong, though not after they walked over 100 miles in just their shorts without food, water, or a map to try and escape. After 2 years in German confinement, the Scot grew restless and managed to escape to get right back into the thick of things, this time as a British officer in coordination with the French resistance. Just like Mad Jack, Tommy was an extremely brazen fighter and would drive around in a car emblazoned with the Union Jack and French resistance flag deep in enemy territory. He killed so many infantrymen and destroyed so much infrastructure that the German put a bounty over his head with the nickname the Kilted Killer. Now that's quite a legacy. Receiving every combat award for valor available from the US Army, as well as French and Belgium awards for heroism, Audie Murphy is undoubtedly the pride of the US military. Forging his way into the US military at the age of 16 in 1941, after the devastating attacks at Pearl Harbor, the short man from Texas quickly took up the task of proving his worth, and that's exactly what he did, and some. To simplify Murphy's immense actions for the sake of video length, he essentially, at the age of 19, single-handedly held off an entire company of German soldiers, using every resource he had available, constantly ducking between vehicles and using their guns while completely exposed to the enemy, telling his men to get to cover. Once he saw his men were out of the danger zone, he even called an artillery strike on his position and kept fighting the Germans himself for over an hour. By the time he repelled the attack, a wounded Murphy refused to be evacuated and rallied his men for a counterattack that drove the Germans back to the woods, thus successfully defending the crucial Colmar pocket for the Allies. A truly remarkable man that I simply don't have enough time to fully cover in this video. Norwegian commando Jan Balsrud and his men had their work cut out for them and their plan completely fleshed out until, by freak chance, they went to a man with the same name as a trusted resistance contact they were looking for, who betrayed them and their mission to sabotage the German war effort. The morning after, their small fishing boat filled with explosives was hunted down and destroyed by the Germans, and the only Norwegian to escape was Balsrud, swimming away in ice-cold Arctic water to a snow gully, where he shot and killed a pursuing Gestapo officer with his pistol. Now a wanted man, the Germans issued a nationwide manhunt for Balsrud, and he embarked on one of the most testing escapes of the war. Trying to escape to a neutral or allied country, Balsrud only had Norwegian patriots to rely on and suffered from frostbite and snow blindness on his initial period of escape. His feet were frozen solid, he wandered into a snowstorm for 3 days, was buried to his neck in an avalanche, entombed for 4 days, and abandoned under open skies without so much as a map nor food or water for 5 days. As the week and a bit went by, he finally managed to link up with some Norwegian patriots and was forced to operate on his leg to draw out poisoned blood, as well as amputate 9 of his toes to stop the spread of gangrene. From there on out, he was passed to Norwegian peasant on a stretcher and near death, until finally, after 2 months of hell, and with the help of random Norwegians, he made it to northern Finland for immediate medical attention and then was quickly transported to Sweden, where he spent months in hospital. He eventually relearned how to walk and was sent back to England to train more Norwegian resistance member commandos in their fight against the Germans. His symbolic escape is still the subject of Norwegian pride to this day, and rightfully so. So guys, that was 7 different men from 7 different countries with extremely inspiring stories, and many of which struck fear into the hearts of enemies. And as I stated before, if you do want there to be a part 3, do leave me suggestions in the comments section below of countries I haven't already covered in part 1 and 2, and then there is a potential for a part 3. Also, I do want to restate that all of these stories are relatively simplified, and there are so many more layers that I didn't really delve into for the sake of the length of the video. If you do want to learn more about these guys, I will be posting all the links on my Discord server, so make sure you go and check that out. And if you do want to help support the channel more than you already are, please go and check out the Patreon. And I want to thank all my Patreons, old and new. This channel has recently experienced a lot of growth, so I just want to say a warm welcome to everybody who's joined recently, and I hope you're enjoying the style of videos. Please do leave me recommendations, as they're always helpful. And as always, thank you for watching, and I hope you learned something new.